Hey guys, how's it going? Here we have another tutorial. And today I am going to be drawing this man's teeth. Still haven't revealed who this person is, but I'm guessing some of you have already guessed it. Yeah, so I'm going to do teeth now because I thought I'm going to do eyes as well. I'm going to show you eyes with this drawing because the eyes in this one are quite interesting and weird. They're not very normal looking eyes. But let's get on with these teeth right now. What do we do with teeth? Well, as you can see in my reference here, these teeth are quite soft. There isn't a lot of texture. It's quite different to what's been going on in all these other areas around it. All these wrinkly lips and wrinkles on his face. These teeth are very, very different to that. They're in shadow, they're quite dark, and they're very soft and slightly out of focus, which is pretty normal for teeth, to be honest with you. That's generally what you're going to get with teeth because they're hidden in people's mouths, aren't they? First thing I like to look at when I do this is take a look at my reference and see what colours I can see. There's quite a lot of warm greys and sort of ivory type colours. So I've picked out the appropriate palette. It's best to have a look at your reference before you start working. Oh, I'm running out of battery. I better plug this thing in. Don't run out of battery. Don't run out. I'm plugging you in. There we go. Okay, so I'm probably going to start this with some Luminance titanium buff. It's quite a nice off-white colour. And the Luminance pencils are really great for areas like this. Areas that are soft and just need a good soft sort of smudgy kind of feel to it because it's not necessarily in focus. So here we go. Just adding a base here. Just a basic little base of colour which we're going to build on. You can see I've already added some of the dark bits in between when I was doing the lips. Okay, so another colour I found goes really nicely in this area is Luminance Raw Umber 10%. Just going to start adding this shadow that we're getting here. It's actually quite dark, this tooth. This is the one that's probably one of the darkest ones because it's sort of furthest into the mouth and the least amount of light is getting to it. So I'm just gonna start bringing that out. The other thing that can happen with teeth is you can get kind of reflections from the room and inside of the mouth. So don't be surprised if, you know, when you're doing a teeth, you might need to have a bit of that kind of lip palette coming in there now and then, which is what I'm going to do now, because I'm thinking there's a bit of this kind of ochre coming in on the sides. Yeah, just a little, very, very little, just gently. This is a brown ochre. So you're getting kind of the sort of reflections of his skin and the colours that are on his skin reflecting slightly off his teeth. And also you will get slightly yellower teeth, which goes for these kind of colours. Teeth are never white, you know. Even if, you know, you've got someone who's had their teeth done, still in natural lighting they probably still won't look completely white because they're inside their mouth, and if the photo of them has been from like with a flash, then yeah, you probably will see whiteness a lot more. But majority of the time, teeth are quite off-white colour. So you've got a little gap here. So try to think about when drawing in general and when colouring in general, try to think about how dark an area is that you're applying shadow to. Like now, I'm applying this, adding this ochre to the gap here between his teeth. Well, it's not a gap, it's where the teeth meet, and it's darker in the middle. You know, I'm not using a very dark colour, because it wouldn't be really that natural to just put a really dark colour there straight away. I mean, this is almost as dark as it goes here. If you have a look, I mean, I don't know if you can tell from this shot, this looks quite dark on your screen probably, this, but to me I can see that it's more brown looking, that gap. Yeah, so let's carry on over here. Add a bit more of this titanium buff. And there's quite a few warm greys here as well. And a bit of sort of yellow. This is olive brown 10%. I think this is quite a good colour here. See, there's a bit more shadow at the top. It's nice having a break from just doing lots of very textured stuff. It's nice doing soft stuff like this as well. Makes a nice difference. When you're doing, you know, an endless sort of landscape of wrinkles and pores, you know, you can go a bit mad after hours and hours of it. So it's nice to have soft areas as well. I mean, I picked this photograph because I really like how much detail there is. Using a photograph with sharp, detailed and soft areas is actually a really nice thing to do because you get a nice contrast. Now there's quite a bit of blue here, like a blueness coming in through the teeth as well. The main thing I'm getting here is like a greys, blues and bit of sort of yellows and ochres in his teeth. It's really good to try and think about all the different colours you can see, every single last one, and don't ever stop on just one colour, just keep on moving around. You can always come back to another colour. This one here is silver grey, very light greyish blue or bluish grey. And yeah, this is just what we needed right now. With coloured pencils, it's best to start light and work your way towards darkness. So I'm probably going to get a lot darker than this. Notice how you can't really see a definition here between the teeth. That will come, but it's not an obvious line like this one here. The definition that separates these teeth is more subtle in the way this tooth is shaded and the way this tooth is shaded. So let's try and see that come alive now. I'm going to use a slightly darker colour, warm grey 3, quite a nice dark warm grey, Polychromos warm grey. So we're just going to bring in some of these shadows that are here on these teeth. As always, remember, there is no rush. There's never any rush. It's all about just being in the moment and enjoying it. Rushing through just means you're not really doing it. You're doing it for just getting something done, and that's not fun. You don't want to do that. You don't want to end up making art like that. It's better to do it because you enjoy doing it. So put a bit of grey there to emphasise the darkness of that gap. I'm going to get my sepia out and just define this a bit more. Just want to define it so where it's dark. Again, I'm using CPOC, not black straight away. Black is the last thing to use. Done a video on that if anybody wants to have a look at that. It's quite important to know when to use black. So, what are we seeing now? I think I should get myself another ochre colour, slightly lighter than the last one, to add some of this yellowing. And maybe slightly murky. This is a really murky, swampy colour. Not exactly a great colour to have on your teeth, is it? It's murky, swampy colour. But it's there, unfortunately. Right, let's put this in. I think this is one of the darker colours that we've really needed. You can see it's kind of like building up a very subtle patchwork of different colours. Try and emulate what we can see in the photograph. Now, it's always going to be very tempting with teeth to just think that, you know, oh, teeth are white. And never would you think, oh, you know, this colour here, look at this colour, I mean, look at it. You'd never think that's the colour to use, but we've got to think of things subtly. That's a very subtle thing. In a very subtle way, yes, this is exactly the colour you need for especially these areas where you've got shadow, and it needs to be a natural looking shadow. So this is kind of like a shadow colour for slightly yellow teeth, you know? because this is way darker than just yellow teeth. This is olive brown 50%. I really like the luminance range for skin tones. You know, they've literally covered everything. It's brilliant. Now I'm going to bring back some more of this. I think I'm going to put in some grey here. See a bit of grey. Yeah. A little bit of grey coming off his teeth just there. Then yeah, bit of this slightly darker grey. Sorry if my voice sounds a bit funny. If my voice ever sounds like this, it's because I've got a pencil in my mouth. It's just a habit. I like having a pencil in my mouth sometimes. If I'm switching between two different pencils. So just bringing in extra dark areas now with this cold grey. Sometimes when you've loaded the paper like I have now, putting more colour down doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make a bit of a difference, and that's what's important. You need to be able to juggle that tiny difference that you make towards the end of how much the paper can take. Go over it again in some areas with the buff titanium. Still think it's a bit too bright, so I'm going to darken it further using a warm grey, I think. What is this? French grey. Yeah, French grey. 30%. There. Now we're getting somewhere with it. Again, French grey on its own. Definitely wouldn't think that's for teeth. But after you've put a load of different colours down, this is actually a really nice way of darkening areas on this particular place. Now, sometimes with teeth you've got to go back and add the edges on a little bit again, because you're adding quite light colours to an area where there's very dark colours as well, like here, so they can bleed into it. You need to kind of add that dark colour back into it, like so. Now, on its own you might think, well, that's a bit weird and mushy looking, but that's what softness looks like. You know, on its own it might look a bit mushy and not very detailed, but when you zoom out and in the grand scheme of things, you know, that's what it's supposed to look like. It looks right. So don't worry if you're doing a soft area. Don't put, you know, fake detail into a soft area if it has none. Make it soft. Leave it soft. What do I mean by soft? I mean soft focus, as in it's not pin sharp and focused, you know? Just adding this shadow to this lip again. So let's keep on. Let's keep on going with this. The next bit is a bit more yellow. Again, I'm going to put a base of titanium buff down. Very gentle base of titanium buff. This provides like a kind of, almost like a thin layer to mix on almost. It's just the way I look at it. So we've got our titanium buff on there. Is it called titanium buff or buff titanium? I always mix it up. Yeah, titanium buff. We're just going to move this over here. I can hear my cat wants to come in. Come on then. Another colour I like using actually here, I should be using, I just realised, is the Nougat. It's a nice dark colour for this kind of job. This particular area, these kind of creams and creamy sort of ivory colours, when you're making those colours darker, I think the Nougat is brilliant. Polychromos, this one. I do love mixing the two brands together, although I think using luminance makes Polychromos less, how do I put it? It makes it so that you can't blend them as much for as long. You know, you get to a point where it just doesn't want to work because the luminance really does cake itself onto the paper. Whereas if you're using Polychromos on its own, you could just go on and on and on for a long time before the paper had nothing left to draw on. Yeah, so I quite like that Nougat. Now let's bring in this Rom 10%. There's quite a bit of yellow here, so we're going to use a bit of this ochre first. Brown ochre. Is it 50%? Yeah. Just here, there's quite a bit of yellowing going on. Don't know if it's shadow or if it's actually yellowing. I'm going to bring some of this slightly yellower tone in, which is Naples ochre. Right. That was a bit annoying. My camera just ran out of memory and I was just talking and talking and I didn't realise. It's okay, we haven't missed too much. Let's carry on. Now, where I'd got to was this tooth here ends kind of around here, and we have fleshy tones come in. Not quite fleshy tones, they're very dark though. So what we have here is some dark violet-y sort of colours coming off his tongue. Just going to add that in so we know where we're at, you know, where the tooth ends. Now you don't know, I'm not necessarily going to do all of this perfectly straight away. I'm just going to block it in just so we know where everything is. Right, I think this is, need a bit more here, a bit more tooth, that is. There we go. God, I always have a blocked nose. You can always hear me breathing on the camera because of my blocked nose. Right. Let's get some of this Molten Violet in. Nice and dark in the corners here. And some around here. Bring in some of this. This is the luminance equivalent. Slightly different though, slightly lighter. Don't like what's happened there. What's that? What's going on there? Don't want that. Putting a bit of sepia here where we have the darkest parts right underneath this tooth. It's almost like an outline the way it looks. Let's put some more of this normal mortem, caput mortem here. It's actually just called mortem, I think. Is it? I don't know. The titles of these pencils confuse me. I don't really know them by their titles that well, it's just the colours. Right, let's carry on with this tooth here. Got quite a bit of dark bits, yellowing dark bits, all in shadow. Now remember, these teeth are in shadow, which is why they look like this at the moment. When we step back from the picture and have a look at the whole thing without this, you will see that the sort of dark yellowness in the teeth is the correct colour. It's always good to try and think of everything like what it's going to be like in its finished state, and don't worry about what it looks like immediately in front of you. If you do that, you'll just never do anything, because you know things take time. They take time. Add a bit more tint of yellow here, just tinting it very gently. I'm hardly pressing at all now, just adding a little tint. If I were to press with this hard, look at what would happen. So it's quite nice to really softly just add subtle little shades in here and there. This is a cold grey, which is, I want to use a cold grey now. Again, I'm using a cold grey much like I was using the ochre just then. Just very subtly adding some of these cold grey hues here and there. And sometimes you'll get to a certain tooth or a certain part and you'll be like, oh yes, I've realised there's this particular kind of detail on this teeth. And then you look back to your other ones that you've done and you're like, oh, actually, I've just realised I've not included that kind of detail or that colour. So then you go back, like I am now, adding a bit extra here and there. It's just about finely adjusting everything until you're happy with it all, really. You can see I'm doing kind of light circular motion. Because there's no specific direction here with these teeth. They're not you know, textured or going in any specific direction. There isn't like a wrinkles like here which are going a certain way. So it's important that we try and make sure that is expressed by the way that we are using our pencils. So this is a very soft area, and it needs to stay soft, so just going to use a few colours in circular motion like this. Initially you can be a bit more rough like I was with the titanium buff, but afterwards when you're building up the colours it's good to try and blend it all nicely in if you can't see a direction or a texture. Now there's a subtle darkness here which I'm going to try and achieve. First, so we've added the ochre there, now I'm adding a bit of this nougat into it as well. Okay, so we've got that nougat in. Now there's an even darker bit just here, so I'm going to just add that in. It's just this tiny little dark speck. These kind of little dark bits make all the difference with gaps in teeth. Okay, now I want to blend that out slightly, so make the bits around it slightly darker. There we go. Now I might just make these gaps a bit darker as well. Now this is darker here too. Don't want to miss on that. There we go. I think I've overdone that there. Don't want all of that. That's all actually slightly beginning to get pinker there, so I think I'm going to use some dark flesh there, which is a very pink colour. But just here we have a nice slight sort of pinkness starting. So I'm going to add that in and then make it darker with the mortem afterwards. It's almost red as well, actually, so let's see what... This red? No, this red. Yeah. So add a little tint of red. This is very gentle now. Really important to try and think about how gently you need to press. Like, look at this colour. I mean, it is just so red. But in this context, I'm just very gently adding a little bit to add a slight tint of red, which I can see here very close up in the picture. I mean, I don't know if you guys can there. The camera isn't exactly going to be showing you the screen properly, but there's a very slight redness there. So I'm adding a bit of pink and a bit of red, just in the area that I can see. Much like I've done here on the lips. And then go back to it with some mortem, because the mortem is the predominant colour there. And just bring some of that darkness back. Now right here, it's much more mortem here than pink, so this is the sort of, there's a sort of gradient going on here. So we want to get from over here, which is mortem, slight grey there as well, a more sort of violet grey like this one. This is a, yeah, well, this is called violet grey. I did not know this was called violet grey. I just sort of guessed. But kind of violet grey here, because it's a kind of skin tony, sort of inside the mouth kind of grey that we're seeing. So put a bit of violet grey in. Now we add this mortem. Now one thing I'm seeing here now is that this isn't quite so, the bit between this sepia here and the violet grey and the mortem I've had, there isn't much of a nice smoothness to it. It just goes from sepia straight into the dark fleshy tones inside the mouth. So what we're going to do is use the colour that's the best colour that's in between the sepia and the mortem, and that's the mortem violet. So it's as dark as that mortem colour gets without being sepia. And we're just gonna blend it out into the rest of the mouth. So we're adding that in, adding a bit in up here as well. Now we can get the sepia again, and then blend the sepia into it slightly more. You can see it's a bit softer now. You want to soften those edges, because there aren't really any. You know, if you're seeing edges in an area where there aren't edges, make them disappear. You don't want them there. Let's get some of this pink in. Oh no, actually, let's get the red in. See, the pink is actually a light colour, so I think it's not quite the right thing to put there right now, because this is dark here, but there's a sort of red pinkish hue coming off it, so you want to use the red and blend it into the mortem. So here we go. You can see this is slowly coming together now. There's very sort of subtle, soft tones coming in. I think softer areas are easier in a lot of ways, because you can just slowly bring it about and do tight little circles and blend everything in. It's harder to blend sharp edges with softness, you know. Luckily there isn't too much of that here, so so let's get this tooth ready. We're gonna plonk a nice little base down. I'm just gonna get rid of some of these pencil marks. Where's my brush? Don't use your fingers, get a brush. Fingers can have pigment on them, which has happened to me quite a few times. It's kind of about learning what colours you need to use for the specific area you're working on as you're working on it, really. I mean, you know, at the beginning I was using buff titanium lots and lots. Now I'm not using it as much. I've discovered that this raw umber 10% is probably more relevant for these teeth. You know, if you try and apply that kind of logic to every single part of your drawing, you'll always be able to come to a good guess at what colours you need to use. Just slowly develop what you think you need to do in that particular area. I think I actually need to be even darker in certain areas. Let's get the nougat out. I think it needs to be darker up here. It's just the way it goes with these kind of things, you know, you spend so long on one section, you kind of can't see it, and then you go back to it. Can happen. So here we go. A bit more darkness on this tooth here. I think objects in shadow, what colour you think it should be, is one of the hardest kinds of objects to colour. Especially if it's something that you're in your mind, you're pretty sure of the colour it should be, but the environment it's in is really warping that object. This is kind of what's happening here, you know. These teeth are extremely dark and weird and yellow, and it's so easy to think, oh, this is too yellow, isn't it? But it isn't. It's just that the environment they're in, i.e. in someone's mouth with a shadow casting over them, they need to be dark. There's parts of the picture that are very light right next to it, like here. This is very light, lots of light hitting this skin here and then making this shadow. So if you were to make the teeth too bright, this wouldn't look light anymore, and you wouldn't have this sort of nice contrast that you get here. So it's important to really follow, try and see what you're drawing, and really try and follow the colours that you can see, and not the colours that you think should be there. Sometimes you do need to do a bit of guesswork, but I think, you know, when you've got a nice reference like this, you really just have to check out what colours are there and try and replicate them. I'm going to get some more ochre here. some of this. I think this is, yeah, green gold. Green gold is a really, really good colour for tinting yellow into stuff. It's such a powerful colour. This is green gold in the Polychromos. So powerful, and just a tiny bit goes such a long way. You know, if you want to give a nice yellow tint to something. Luminance are great as well, but they're more, I think of them as more like nice, lovely, thick oil paints, you know? You can just blend them into each other beautifully, and they do actually save you a lot of time if you've got Polychromos. You can just do a whole load of blending and just cover your paper with the colours you need quite quickly with Luminance. Polychromos is a little bit slower to work with because it's harder, so you have to be more careful the way you're putting it down. You can put down lots of silly marks that you don't want because of its hardness. Let's get some nougats over here. Get this back over here. Right, slightly more yellowness going on. Let's get this yellow stuff out. Prime rose again. Keep on wanting to call this primrose. Right, so let's continue making this nice and yellow. I don't like flattering people's faces in my pictures. I prefer it if I draw every last little nook and cranny. It's way more fun that way. Still think somehow I just need to make it slightly darker still. It's not quite dark enough. I think I'm going to have to make it a bit darker. Really have to go back and check. Just keep on going back and checking. Yeah, you just can't ever just be happy straight away. Can't ever let yourself just be happy with it straight away. Just go back and check. Make sure you're doing what you want to do with that place. See, I think I've made this too bright now. I'm going to darken these down a bit more. Yeah, I know they look like weird grey rotten teeth, but they're not. They're just teeth in shadow. And See, there's like a kind of slight brightness on the tips of the teeth. I think that's more to do with teeth than anything. It's not actually lighting, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit of white there. Because we've had so much more so many colours down already that we can actually make that slight subtle change in brightness using a white. It's going to go over the colours that are already there. Add a slight whiteness to the edges. Right here, we've got it on this tooth quite a lot actually. But this isn't really going to be very obvious until I've put the darker bits below that one. Darker still. You also got to remember that if you're using a reference that's on a tablet like this, a tablet's going to have a much higher contrast than you can ever have with a pencil. So, you know, the whites are going to be really white and the darks are going to be really dark, and that's because it's something that's backlit and it is literally not the same medium whatsoever, not even close to the same medium. So you've got to realise that it is going to be slightly different on the tablet than what you can get in front of you. So don't get too freaked out by that problem either. Sometimes, I mean, I guess that's why some people prefer printing out their references and using a reference like that, but I'm not really a big fan of doing that. One, I just think it's a bit of a waste of paper and print, to be honest. Two, I just prefer it. I prefer the way that on a screen like this you get a really sharp and everything's kind of exaggerated, so you can use that to your advantage. Just making these top bits darker and got to add a tiny bit of this green gold again. Where are you, green gold? There you are. Just here, just to yellow it up slightly. A bit of ochre. Now, let's add some darkness again so we can see the contrast between here and here. I'm going to darken up this fleshy part. This is actually mostly going to be sepia, but I'm just using this as a reference for now. Where's my mortem? Caput mortem. A very useful colour. Good on. I'd probably use it. I don't think I've ever done a drawing so far without using this colour. It's just a great colour that adheres everywhere, and you can always use it if you're doing flesh, all kinds of flesh, all colours of flesh, you know, in shadow or not. It's a pretty versatile little colour, this. And there we go. Let's just make it clear what's what, just for the moment. Now I'm going to add the sepia that is just along here that really defines this tooth. This is just along here. We have sepia or black. I mean, I might add some black in a bit to this because this is just on the edge, but as always I like to start with sepia. Actually, I'll bring back some of the sepia over here as well, and this has a bit of darkness here too. There we go. Again, it's actually quite dark all the way around, almost like an outline. And we'll leave this bit, just concentrate on this part here. So, there, we're getting somewhere now. I think I'm seeing this tooth a bit more. Now, it gets to this point where it's sepia, 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 and then here the outline changes into more of a mortem colour. So I'm going to carry on this outline around the tooth with the mortem when it gets to around here. It's a bit too thick, and I've gone over the line slightly. And it's okay to sometimes use this rubber again. I actually really like this Tombow for doing this because it's, the edges of these teeth are slightly brighter, and you can do that with white, but you can also do it by erasing slightly. Now the colour behind here is red, like a reddish mortem, so we want to blend that nicely so the red and the mortem just marry together and don't become anything else. Now I can also see a bit of this violet, where is it? Grey violet. Is this it? No, that's not it. Although I do see a bit of that as well. Yeah, I'll put that in. So can you see there's this slight sort of area of redness here, just how I wanted it. It's really important to try and see subtleties like that and bring them in at every given opportunity, because that's ultimately what leads to hyperrealism, if that's what you're aiming for. Very small subtleties all together in one place equals something that's hyperreal. I think maybe that's why it can be quite hard to achieve, because it's you've got to not take your eye off the ball ever, basically. If you want to do that, you've got to just have a look at every last little place that you're working on. I think we're getting somewhere now. I'm kind of happy with that. That's looking a bit better. Again, got to use this. Use this because I think we went over that slightly, and then knock it back with the buff titanium. Not white because we've erased to the white of the paper. Even the buff titanium might be a bit too light, but I think it works. Don't quite like the way this is soft here. This isn't really a massively soft edge between here and the dark bits. It's actually quite a hard edge here, so I want to bring that back. There we go. And sepia again. Now, it's okay to go back over the same place again, because you might have, I mean, I think I went over this with some mortem earlier after putting the sepia in as well. So it's good to go back and define areas that you've kind of knocked back by blending. So now we want a bit more definition. There we go. Don't know if you saw what I did there, just scribbled a tiny bit of the sepia over this area and then burnished over it, blended it, smudged it into the area. We're using this colour here because it's quite a bit darker there, and so I'm just adding a bit more extra darkness into the area. Okay, so I think I need to darken this even more. This isn't quite dark enough still. Even considering that you will definitely see this as way darker, this needs to be still darker here. I mean, like, you guys at home will see this as darker, you know. So I am going to darken this up good and proper now. No holding back. There we go. I mean, even though I think I should make it darker, I still wouldn't have done it a different way if I started from the beginning. It's always better to be cautious, you know. Be a bit cautious with how you're doing things. Don't just run into it. And this, to make it darker, I'm using the French grey, which is a nice warm grey, which I think is the right colour here for the dark areas, at least, for these teeth. And because it's soft, you can kind of get away with making quite a lot of layers, and because it's quite such a soft area of the picture. Now some nougat. And teeth are also quite often shiny, and the way that works usually is that you see a tiny glint like there and just here. So I'll be adding those in as well using my electric eraser. Let's darken this up though first. I'm not holding back with this darkening now. Spent too much time not darkening it enough. It's a bit more ochre there. Carry on darkening this stuff. Now I've got a slight darkness just on the lips there that I hadn't quite put in just before the teeth start, and then a bit of darkness just before the teeth start as well, just next to the teeth here. It's not uniform though, it's not like a line, so we've got to make sure it's represented properly. Bit of mortem. Sometimes when I'm doing an area I do leak into the other area next to it that I did ages ago. Yeah, there's never anything wrong with going back and redoing bits, adding bits, completely redoing bits if you're not happy. It's fine. I think I'm now enjoying what's going on here. This is, yeah, this is more like it. And sometimes things are weird, like these teeth here. I mean, you want there to be a dark gap there, but there really isn't. So it's best to trust nature and not put a huge dark bit there. You know, there is a little dark bit just at the top, but nature is saying, no, this photograph, the way it's working right now with the focus and with whatever shading is going on around it, there is not a giant dark line there separating those two teeth out. You need to really stand by those decisions. Again, that's a real key to realism. To really draw what you see and not worry about doing something that you think looks better in your head, because it won't look better, it won't look as natural. Let's just add this little bit of electric eraser here to finish this off. Just sharpening it as I normally do, like so. I think that's nice and sharp. Now, we have a tiny speck just here. And a couple of tiny specks here. Now, you're not quite in the right place there. You're kind of in the middle of that gap, which is a really weird place, but define them a bit. And these kind of little details do make all the difference when trying to achieve realism. Once erased, you can add white onto them as well if you want to emphasize them slightly more. And then I like when there's a highlight like that, I do enjoy sort of emphasizing it by darkening areas around it as well slightly, like this. And so you've got that tiny little gleam there, gleaming away on his teeth. I think there should be slightly darker bits just down here. Yeah. And slightly lighter just there as well. Don't rub out too much, just a little. Again, this wants to be darker as well up here. I don't know why, it just feels like it wants to be darker. I think we should leave it there for now. But you can see the process of doing something soft is also quite time consuming if you're really trying to make every last little area come out in the same way. You know, you really need to have a look at all the tiny weird shapes that you can see in a soft area too, because there are shapes, they're just soft, like there's sort of circular shapes, and I mean it's difficult to explain, but you need to be able to spot tiny differences in shade and apply every last area that you can see, and keep on doing it until you're happy with what's in front of you, as always. That is what I say always. Keep on going until you're happy with what's in front of you. If you're not happy, then don't stop. Keep on doing it. There we go. Right. I think that just about wraps it up for today. I hope to do another one soon, possibly, well, most probably one of these eyes, I'd say, for you guys. Yeah, it's going to be quite a different eye than usual. I haven't actually even done a normal eye tutorial for you lot, so maybe I should do a normal one as well sometime in the future, not one which is quite so odd looking, but I think you will still benefit from doing an eye like this. I like the idea of drawing stuff and teaching you guys to do stuff that's not like a cliched picture of an eye. You know, there's a lot of photoshopped cliched sort of pictures of eyes nowadays that you can use as reference all over the internet. But I think it's way more interesting to do something with character. So yeah, hopefully you can enjoy my next tutorial, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. And I will see you guys next time. Bye bye for now.